Alright, this is a pretty different video that I normally make, and sorry for the voice, I'm a little sick. But, I am into the credit card point travel hacking game or group or whatever, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. And this is a fairly intermediate subject that I'm about to talk about, so if you're new to uh, credit card points and travel hacking, airline booking airlines with points, then this is probably a little too out there. But leave some comments. I'll explain some of the other nuances and go more into depth for like beginners or someone who's new to this in a separate video if needed. I just wanted to talk about really quickly cents per point, which for anyone who's new is basically just the what's the dollar amount that I would be paying for this flight versus the points that I would need to pay for this flight, and how many cents per point am I spending. If I have to spend, if the flight's $100 and I have to spend 10,000 points, then that's exactly 1 cent per point, which is like kind of the bare minimum that everyone in the points community agrees. Like you definitely should not go below that because you could cash out your points. So, for example, Chase points, you could cash them out into your bank account for 1 cent per point. So, if I'm redeeming for an air fare, in this case, it could be a hotel or whatever, but in this case, it's a flight. If I'm redeeming for a flight and I'm getting less than 1 cent per point of value, then that's really bad and I shouldn't do it because I can just cash them out. And people can argue about different ways of doing. At what point is it worth it to accept a certain cent per point or a CPP value? Because points, for example, as you can see here, I have a cent per point value of 2.7, and down over here it's 7.1, which is absurdly high. 2.7 is already very high. Most domestic flights in the US that you're going to find are going to be hovering around 1.2 to 1.6, I would say. Somewhere around that is like pretty standard. Getting anything above that is hard. The only way I was able to get this is because I have Southwest Companion Pass. I'm not going to go into that because I've already been rambling for a few minutes, but basically it's buy one, get one free flights for 2 years, a year. Buy one, get one free flights with Southwest. Go look that up. It sounds too good to be true, but I promise it's not. Just go look up Southwest Companion Pass on YouTube, and you'll get some more information on that. The way I was able to get this is because Alaska has ridiculously good pricing for short haul domestic flights. And I'm booking an American flight, which is technically operated by SkyWest, so that makes it extra confusing. But I'm booking an American flight through Alaska, so incredibly cheap. Anyway, enough rambling. The point that I wanted to bring up is that while cents per point is important, it's not the end all be all, and I think everyone kind of knows that. And there's been a little bit of a trend of like cents per point doesn't matter. I do think it really does matter, but I think it's kind of like your gas mileage in your car. Like, obviously, I don't want to be getting 7 miles per gallon if I had a big Jeep with beefy tires and lifted and perfect for like rock crawling and off roading. I don't want that. I don't need that. But at the same time, and I don't want 7 miles per gallon. So to jump up from that to, let's say, like a pickup truck where I'm getting like 15 miles per gallon, 20 miles a gallon, that's a significant jump, way, way better. Everyone would agree with that. And jumping from there to a sedan where I might be getting 30 miles to the gallon is, again, a huge jump and way, way better. But as soon as you get above like 30 miles a gallon, and I'm not saying 30 miles per gallon is the exact amount, I'm just for the analogy, as soon as you get above a certain threshold, you get diminishing returns. And the amount that you're saving significantly goes down. The amount of money you're saving on gas, let's say, because anyway, I'm not going to beat that dead horse. Law of diminishing returns. to go from 1 point or 1 cent per point redemptions to 2.7 is absolutely insane, crazy good, yada yada yada. And it's more than double. But um, to get much higher than that is super, super hard. This is definitely a little bit of an anomaly. I may have gotten my math wrong on that because I was looking at it like, I don't know how I got 7.1. But anyway, regardless, restructuring my thoughts. Sorry, I've been rambling on this for a while. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, here in this case, even though I have a much, much, much better 7.1 cent per point, which is crazy good, um, in a real life scenario, I would not count this as 7.1. And here's why. I've got 2 different dates here that I blocked out just so that I'm not saying when I'm gone to the internet. But these 2 dates are basically a day apart. One of these is this date over here is the date that I actually need to be in town, and this date over here is the day before. I would prefer to fly into Provo and not into Salt Lake, and so I could fly in here, but honestly, I probably would want to fly in, let's say, like the day before. So basically, what I'm saying is, while this is the best flight down here, flying straight into Provo at the time I want and crazy good cents per point, I can't really value it the full 7.1 cents per point because I would never pay $327. Whereas here, I definitely would pay 150, or in this case, it was like 10,000 points, a little over 10,000. I would definitely pay that the day before and fly in. So I'm getting 7.1 cents per point of value, and it is definitely better for me, and I would prefer this. But I would definitely not pay $327, and this is times 2 because it'd be for my wife and me. The reason why I still have it set to 1 is just because that's how I search. It makes it a lot easier to do the math in my head. Because, for example, Southwest sent us companion pass. I'm not paying for 2 passengers, I'm only paying for 1. And then over here in my head, I can just quickly double it. It's very confusing if I do it the other way around. I'm just used to searching one way, one person. Anyway, so there's my little ramble of why I can't really value this at full 7.1 cents per point, but I can't value it at full 7.1 cents per point. And other people would say, okay, well, you should only assign the value here of whatever the lowest amount you'd actually be willing to pay in real life. You should assign it that, so 2.7. But that also doesn't correctly communicate the value, because this is objectively, for me, a better flight. It gets me in on the day. I don't have to get in late or leave. This would be kind of a tight window to leave by. And it gets me into the airport that I want. Same thing with this flight up here. This flight is more expensive than this one by $59, which isn't much, but it's still more expensive. I didn't calculate the cents per point in this, but whatever. But it flies into SLC. That's much further away from my destination. I don't want that. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, cents per point, you should think about it, and you should try and get it above whatever your threshold is. I would argue it depends on what exactly you're redeeming for. For domestic flights, I would want to get at least above 1.4, 1.3, 1.4, somewhere around there. Lower than that, I'll probably just pay cash if I can. If I can't pay cash, then, and I'm still forced to pay with points, and it's not the end of the world. Right now, I'd rather pay with points. I have a lot more points than I do extra cash. But at the same time, this is a better flight, and so I'm not going to value it at 2.7. So I don't know what the right way to value this is, because it's not 7.1. I'm not going to pay that much money, but it is a better flight than here. So you could come up with some weird way to measure this in terms of, oh, we'll just put it in like the median between 2.7 and 7.1 and then assign that value here. I don't know. All I'm trying to say is you should consider cent per point, but it shouldn't be a data point that you make a decision off of, right? Like it should just be a warning of if I'm getting too low, too close to my threshold, then I should probably be looking at other things or something I'm not considering. Try a different search tool, whatever. But honestly, like as long as you can just quickly glance at the price. Oh, by the way, this is PointsPath. That's a Chrome extension that I've been using. It's really good. I like it. Overlays all of the points data onto Google Flights. I'm not sure I didn't mention that before. Yeah, basically it goes through. I forget all the different airlines that it or airline programs that it searches through, but most domestic flights it will find you a cheaper program through, Alaska, Aeroplan, and a couple other ones are that are usually good for finding good deals on domestic flights. So anyway, sorry for that little interruption there. Just wanted to call that out quickly. Basically, cents per point important, but shouldn't be a data point that you should make a decision off of. It should just be a data point that you keep an eye on for as like a red flag, like, oh, I'm not thinking of something. That's how I would view cents per point. Because here, cents per point is kind of irrelevant, right? Like, we're talking about the difference of 10,000 points for this, or in this case, I'd be paying for 2 tickets, so 9,000 points. The cents per point is way better on this one, like crazy better. But we're talking about a difference of 1,000 points. And you can argue Alaska points are worth more than Southwest points. They go a lot further. But at the end of the day, the actual difference in what I'm spending isn't that big. And the cash prices are astronomically different. So, yeah, the actual difference here, the massive difference you're seeing in cents per point, really isn't that big of a deal at the end of the day. And if you get lost in the spreadsheets, it'd be really easy just to say, oh, this is an absolutely amazing flight, and I'm only ever going to take this. I probably will end up booking this, but who knows? It could make more sense to do this. So anyway, that's a very long-winded way of talking about cents per point. Don't use it as a data point to make a decision off of. Use it as a data point for a red flag of something going wrong in your search. Anyway, hopefully that was helpful. A little bit of rambling on cents per point. There's some other people on YouTube that kind of talk about why it matters or why it doesn't matter. And I think largely everyone is either like on one side of the camp or it really does matter. This would be like the Points BS podcast, Sean and I forget the other guy's name. Anyway, the Points BS podcast I think is Anthony Venture really harp on cents per point. Or maybe it's not Anthony Venture. I forget. Whereas like Stan the Credit Frog, he harps on cents per point doesn't matter at all. Like hardly at all, as long as you're getting at least 1 cent per point. I don't really agree with that. I think it kind of falls in between. But I do agree that you shouldn't be using cents per point to judge how good a redemption is. You should just be using it as a indicator of how bad a particular redemption is, which sounds very similar, but it is different in the sense that the way that I should be judging a redemption is based on other things, such as the time. In this case, I'm talking about a flight. So the time, the duration, how many layovers do I need to take? Maybe one of them is with a certain airline that I have status with. In this case, I'm looking at flights between 2 different cities and a similar distance, but one of them I'd really prefer. So all of those things really come together to actually decide how useful is this And I think if you're planning a trip just to plan a trip, you don't really care where you're going, you just want to go on a trip, then it does matter. But in this case, I'm flying for the holidays. So it's a lot different. I'm flying to a specific place and around a specific time. So probably I shouldn't be expecting as high as a cent per point since I'm constraining a lot of other variables. If I have no variables, then I can really sit around and get a really high cents per point. But even then, like these two flights here and here are extremely similar, and for all intents and purposes, this would still be cheaper even if I was paying cash for everything. I could do this and then pay for an Uber, and it would relatively be the same, apart from the time for Ubering. But the cents per point would be wildly different. And so if you're only going off of cents per point, you would say this is way better. This one would probably be somewhere around this 2.7, 2.3 is kind of the range that I usually get on Southwest flights using the companion pass. But again, you got to factor in like which one is actually more valuable. So anyway, I'm gonna stop talking now because I think I've gotten my point across here, and I'm just rambling at this point. But hopefully that was helpful, and let me know what you guys thought. See you guys.